Motion that council adopt the council policies and priorities committee regular meeting agenda for Monday, October 2nd, 2023 at 1 p.m.
Thank you very much. There's a motion from Councillor Wilson to adopt the agenda. All in favor of that? And that motion is carried. We'll move on to the adoption of the previous minutes, and just would like to get a consensus of the previous minutes. All in favor of that? We'll move on then to presentation and delegations. We have none today, which is a surprise, but anyway, we'll move on to reports and statistics, page 5, 4A, Community Services Quarterly Report. And the CEO, Williams, would you like to speak to this, please?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And today, Director Wagstaff is with us to lead us through this quarterly report for community services.
We'll jump right in and begin page 7, community development. The Community Connection Center has opened up and has had a lot of positive reaction from both public and other agencies. And then also wrapping up the summer with our special events. Canada Day, the Oliver Olds Park parties have finished for the year. Community Showcase, again, we're back to pre-2019 levels for participation at that event for groups presenting there. Still yet to come back to a full attendance to the way we had prior to the pandemic, but it is building itself back. And Culture Days, which was in planning when this report was done and happened over the weekend, so that was good. Good turnout. I guess 2 weekends ago. Community development, again, with the cemetery. We are still seeing that shift to columbarium. That is a trend in the industry, and very much so the trend here at the Olds Cemetery as well. Sunshine Bus, of course, it had some interruptions this summer with some mechanical issues where it had to go into get some warranty work done on it, as well as some work done on the lift. So it's been out of commission a little bit, so that did affect its numbers and trips in comparison to previous. But it's still pretty steady in days in service. Looking ahead, continuing with the Connections Center, there is an open house next week from 1 till 3. So that's for the public to come by. We do know that councillors, you're welcome as well. You have had your own tours, but certainly it has been a popular and well-received service into the community. Applications for FCSS funding for the fall. And so that's open currently. And the biggest challenge we have right now is just not certain how much success the Connection Center is going to have. It's one of those things of, we know it's going to be successful. It's just a matter of how busy is it going to get, and where are we going to go with that. There's a dementia workshop coming up at the Evergreen Center, and of course, Olds Fashion Christmas is well underway to being having the planning for events to come on. We are reviewing the rates for the cemetery, which will come with the rates review this fall. And we are also looking into some rural transit funding, examining the feasibility of expanding transportation beyond just the seniors and mobility-aided individuals that we currently service. With Parks and Recreation, very busy. This is the first summer that we've done some very comprehensive tracking to what we're doing. So we're going to continue to see that, so we can both from a management and an implementation be able to get the best efficiencies we can, and also get a better idea as to where our labor are being deployed. But this allows us to be able to show that and demonstrate where those activities are going. The biggest challenges that we are having, like we're having across the organization, is the budget pieces. We're finding things are costing more at every turn. As well, we're also taking a good look at the equipment that we have and whether we have the right equipment for the greatest utilization we can year round. So that's something we're looking at in the 2024 budget to make sure that we're right-sizing the proper equipment and it can be utilized more year-round. The example being mowers, we park them for 8 or 9 months of the year. There is some other equipment that we can invest in that can be utilized year-round for both seasons, or all 4 seasons. Sports fields utilization, it did dip a little bit in the utilization of baseball diamonds. We know exactly why that is. Softball this year did an agreement with the ORE and used Exhibition 4 and 5, Diamonds 4 and 5 that are on the ORE lands, and they also had a private sponsor that helped them sponsorship that. So softball pretty much exclusively went into the ORE diamonds, which we saw dip in our own diamond usage slightly. A lot of that was made up though by the adult slow pitch, so increasing use in adult slow pitch at OR Hedges made up for a lot of that differences. Sportsplex, ice utilization, we do have a goal to have it at 50%, so we're right in there, about the same type of ice utilization as we've had in the past, just hovering just above that 50%. August ice was slightly down from 2022, and there was a couple of pieces of that. We had a significant amount of ice canceled, what we would say in the last moment. It was canceled late in July. And at that point in time, we're just not able to fill it with other users. So that had an impact on dipping our utilization for the August ice. Dry floor, again, utilization rate was about the same, significantly more hours, but that has to do with us getting back to pre-COVID use in the dry floor. So Lacrosse's hours did increase, but also our time that we were open also increased. So the utilization was about the same as it's been historically. Aquatic Center, of course, a number of impacts on the Aquatic Center. We did change the hours, so that does impact some of the use of the numbers that come in. And we've also been closed for a significant portion of the summer. So it doesn't take very many public swims when you have 300 or so patrons in there to really stack up quickly and make a difference in the numbers. On the upside, though, we did, you can see the annual pass. We did reduce the amount of that annual pass to make it affordable for families, affordable for individuals. Family pass is about the same, but we saw a significant increase in our annual passes. As you can see, it's like 10 times the number as we had in the past. The other focus that we have been looking at both last fall and again this fall upon reopening has been really focusing on the Olds College students as they pay a fee. So we've increased a focus in getting them to utilize that, and that has had success, as you see in the numbers. Capital projects, the Aquatic Center renos are going well, but they are slightly behind in reopening. So now we're looking at the first week of November as a reopen date, not the 15th of October. So just slightly behind there. But it is going well, the repairs that are happening. And you're seeing some of that from the outside as well. New signage is complete. You see them working on the roof this week. So things are progressing steadily, but we are about 2 weeks behind where we anticipated being originally. Playgrounds, both the Rotary Athletic Park Playground and Gene Statham Park Playground with Kiwanis has been completed and opened. Sportsplex, new score clock was installed this summer. Sound system upgrade and mechanical replacements completed, and Live Barn has got the bugs worked out of it and is live so that people can stream in and watch their friends or family play if they're not able to make it in person. The Wibbit was received early before the pool closure, so it did have a soft opening with the Wibbit. So again, we're looking forward to having that as an additional resource for the pool here this fall. We did do an RFP for security camera systems. We are changing over the system that we have used in the arena and at the Splash Park. Those systems will be converted over this fall. And we did add in a few cameras in the renovations in the aquatic center. Of course, those are on public areas, not on the swimming areas, so the exit doors and that area. But we do have, with that RFP, we also looked at other town facilities, and we'll be presenting those to council moving forward for a proposal if you wish to implement security cameras in other facilities, both indoor and outdoor. Challenges and learnings, what's coming up, as I had mentioned, the right sizing for parks equipment, just making an evaluation on, an assessment on do we have the right equipment to get the best utilization year round and the right equipment to do the work for parks. Continuing to revise service levels that we have been implementing in 2023, seeing where those have gone well and what we can tweak moving forward into 2024. That's connected to service levels around sports fields, in particular the Rotary Athletic Park, getting a better analysis on what it costs us to operate the sports fields in both labor and other inputs. Rotary Athletic Park projects. Toboggan Hill maintenance is another one that we're going to be looking at, as well as the ball diamond compaction issue, making sure that we're doing the right practices at the right times for both field compaction and, sorry, I don't know what I hit when my screensaver went, but it twisted around. And the soccer turf in particular, it's the area that we didn't build as turf. So where minor soccer plays has quite a bit of other material growing in it that we need to take care of so it doesn't creep into the turf itself, and it's also a better playing surface where the grassed area is. So those are things that we're looking at on practices of what we're applying and when we're applying it for weed control, as well as fertilization and watering. And we're continuing having some really good success in implementing teams. Certainly lots of examples where staff are sharing the advantages for efficiencies and being able to utilize teams for being, even the example of preparing a report like this where you can have 5 or 6 people working on one document at the same time and sharing it over distance. So that's a tremendous efficiency. Also in our communications ability amongst staff. So that's lots of positives in that transition. The budget itself, capital budget, to give you an overview, a lot of the expenses, this was as of the end of August, so a lot of the expenses had not come in yet for the work being done in the aquatic center, so those had not hit the books yet. Similar with a couple of the larger Sportsplex projects that happened this fall. They had not come through yet financially. With regards to parks, in the Gene Statham Park, as you know, when we opened that up and built we recognized that there was significant water issue in that park. So we addressed that this fall, or this summer. That did, though, come at a cost, and that's what you're seeing here in a bit of the overrun in the parks capital budgets. Sports fields, predominantly a lot of that is the score clock. So that's waiting for fundraising. We're not doing any of the investment into that until we're assured from Minor Ball that they're moving forward with that project on a fundraising basis. So there may be a carry forward in that, but that is the most significant part of that budget was the score clocks. And again, we're waiting for Minor Ball's commitment to the actual score clock before we put any investment into it. Operating budgets, we're about on target to where we should be on a typical year. Nothing is standing out there that I would acknowledge. The biggest one would be, of course, New to You will be dropping off. That is completed its back in the first quarter. We completed our operations with New to You. Health and safety, we did find that a lot around the mowing And it was indicating that we did evaluate that people just need to, slow down when they're getting into close proximity in areas of fences and inclines, that type of thing. Nothing serious, but we did still want to ensure that we're talking to staff about that and reinforcing that. Again, on the unfortunate trend that we do see is as the summer progresses and get near the end of the summer, we do find that our incidents do increase there. So we still will be, we did a midsummer orientation again, just to re-emphasize to the summer staff that it's important to stay vigilant throughout the summer. But we did see that those increased again in incidents near the end of the summer. And that's the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wagstaff, for your report. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Pardon me, and through you to Director Wagstaff. So under the Sunshine Bus, I see that we're applying for the Rural Transit Fund to examine the feasibility of expanding this service. Can you refresh my memory? Have we ever approached the Olds Legion in the past to see if we can partnership with them in any way to provide some transit within the town of Olds, or is that a feasible option that we would have?
We have in the past approached those agencies in the community, I mean Legion being one of them, that do have transportation for their own clientele. We are circling back on that again, but in the past when we've approached them, they have unique needs that they wanted to ensure that their clients had access to the vehicle, but we are circling back on that still.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you to Director Wagstaff. One or two comments and then a question. One, I like the report. I like the metrics, so thanks very much. I really like the new score clock in the arena. I can actually read it now, so thanks for that. And my question relative to the Community Connection Center, I know it's new, but perhaps, and you've alluded to, you guys may become a victim of your own success. If you look into your crystal ball, what are those pinch points likely to be going forward? Is it going to be around human resource? Is it going to be human resource and expertise? Is it going to be space availability and meeting? Can you give an idea where you may expect to see those pinch points coming forward?
2 pinch points, and it's early on, so you want the excitement to settle in and then be able to take some of those evaluations. But certainly 2 of the early pinch points have been some afternoon coverage. So the front reception is covered throughout, the Sunshine Bus is there throughout the morning, so that was the coverage. We did explore whether or not we could have more volunteers in that space to be able to help with the reception. So that's one of the early pinch points because we are busy. The second one, as you said, was space availability. We've already had other agencies come forward asking if there was office space in that piece, and there isn't currently. We didn't overreach at the start. Felt that if we can grow and be successful at the start, we'll see where that takes us. But those are certainly the 2 early pieces.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and truly a supplemental, and perhaps through you to the CAO. I just want to confirm from previous discussions, and I don't want to preempt any budget discussions, but the funding formula is a split 80-20, I believe, and as far as we know, that's going to continue. And without going into a lot of the detail, is it a simple matter of town would develop its FCSS budget, submit that to the province, and the province would say, cut us a check for 80% of that? Or is it a little bit more complex?
Thank you for the question. In fact, it's a lot less complex. The funding exists no matter what we do. We get that 80% check, but we do have to report on activities the money was spent on, and is a very narrow gap in terms of what's allowable. It's largely focused on preventative services, I believe, funding through FCSS versus, let's say, reactive programs. But the budget exists. If council recalls, the decision to go ahead with the Connection Center was We were running into those continued barriers with granting out those funds, which is our FCSS model for quite some time now. So providing this subsidized space for certain groups was thought as the more proactive measure. But answer your question, we're getting the money regardless. It's on us to make sure we don't overspend and spend within the guidelines.
Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of quick questions here. If we go back to page 10, the presentation of the agenda, but the presentation there. Here we show administration costs at 11% of the overall budget for Parks and Recreation. I'm a little concerned it's a high number for administration in the services. Does that include the salary of the scheduler as administration or as a worker? That's only, I'm just trying to justify 10% or 11% of the budget going to administration for parks.
So this, just to be clear, this percentage isn't budget, this is activity. So the amount of activity. So what's included in administrative is also when they're doing, it's part of the piece. Do you want to put it under health and safety, or do you want to put it under administrative? So when they're doing toolbox meetings, when they're following up on paperwork, when they're doing things like tracking the data, that's what they're putting into the time for around administrative.
Thank you, and Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. And my comment, or I need clarification on, is on your health and safety page, which is page 18. Under the 2023 column, in quarter 3, you mentioned you have 4 incidences between July 1st and August 31st. But then between like year to date, January 1st to August 31st, you have 21. Now, just wondering, you mentioned down below that a lot of these have to do with the mower operators and so forth, and I'm just wondering, in that year to date, you know, there's only 2 months basically in there, or 3 months of mower operation in there. Am I to assume that there's other incidents that happen between January and the mowing date as well, and which would not be our summer students, I'm thinking, but I may be mistaken there. If I could get clarification, that'd be good.
So there's some timing pieces there. So my anecdotal comment is about a number of them that occurred in August that you won't see come through because they came through in September as far as the paperwork, but they were incidents that happened in August. So you don't see the number here yet, but what I was referring to was there was a handful of them that would double that number, more than double that number of 4, right in the last couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you. Supplemental.
Go ahead, Councillor Daly.
So with that, then we're looking at a higher number then, probably in that July and August. Was there any missed time accidents coming out, or missed time incidences that are coming out of this summer?
Not in these incidences, no.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Cummings and then Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we can go back to page 11 this time and look at the ball diamonds. So in your presentation, you mentioned that one of the softball organizations moved from Town of Olds facilities to ORE facilities. Have we reached out to that organization to see if this is a multi-year deal, a single-year deal, a one-off, or have we pretty much lost them as clients? And the reason I ask that is, let's lead to you talked about the OR Hedges ball diamonds having less hours because the softball group moved over to OR Hedges, yet the OR Hedges ball diamonds use 140 hours more this year than last year. The significant decreases I see are actually in Deer Meadows and Imperial, and the 60 or so at the athletic park. What I'd like to know is if this is a trend in reducing hours in some facilities, increasing hours in some facilities. Do we have more data to see if this is, especially since the Rotary Athletic Park was opened, more of a trend that we could actually look at decommissioning? some of the ball diamonds rather than continuously adding more and more ball diamonds and seeing reductions in hours.
Go ahead,
So yes, we do have that data, and I'll clarify that. So I did also mention that adult slow pitch picked up. So adult slow pitch uses Diamond 3, which in previous years, until this year, had been a baseball diamond, had a mound in it. Slow pitch donated their time and equipment to take out that mound and build it back so it can be used for slow pitch. So right now, Diamond 3 at OR Hedges is almost exclusively used by adult slow pitch. So those numbers came up. So we actually increased usage at OR Hedges because adult slow pitch moved in. Minor softball has a multi-year agreement with the ORE. So we decommissioned those use of those two diamonds as town diamonds. ORE chose to continue to utilize them and use them as ball diamonds, and they made an arrangement that gave exclusivity to minor softball to those diamonds. That's where the time went from. We also saw the time where they were booking out at Rotary Athletic Park went down as well. So we made up, more than made up, for the loss of minor softball with adult slow pitch at OR Hedges. And then it was just less use on Family Dental, Olds Family Dental diamond at OR Hedge, or sorry, at Rotary Athletic Park. When you see Deer Meadow, that's Special Olympics. We are going to ask them on, was that a trend? I believe that was more of a one-off this year where their use was down, but that the whole hours you see in 2022 and in 2023 is Special Olympics. There were a few hours in Deer Meadow that slow pitch moved over to their new diamonds that they're utilizing. So that's the combination of the impacts.
Thank you, Director Wagstaff. I do want to point out that we did see a total number of hours increase from 2022 to 2023, so that's good to see. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan, and through you to Director Wagstaff. So going back to page 10, when we see the tax by percentage, and we see sports fields here at 17%, and then I see watering down further, which is strictly only, our planters, trees, and flowers. With the Rotary Athletic Park, we have no irrigation in there. We are using potable water, are we not, to water out in those fields? And is that included in the 17% of the sports field? Because that takes a lot of time, I would suspect, to water those diamonds, to keep them up to the standard they need to be to play that level of baseball. And will we, at some point in time, be looking at having to budget for irrigation out there?
So the last part, yes, we do have to look at the water, and that is in the sports fields budget. So water, it doesn't take as much labor because it is an irrigation system out there. It's all automated. So there's a little bit of the sports field 17% you see for maintenance and that around the irrigation system, but the actual physical time is automated. So it's going on the machine, as compared to the watering of flowers is a labor cost.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and just a question through you to the Director, and picking up on a comment the CAO made relative to the funding from the government and then our, I guess, for lack of a better word, proof or justification of the programs we delivered in the community. So at some point in the future, and maybe it has happened and I can't recall, but and I'm sensitive to the administrative burden to pull this information together, although I do really like your use of the word efficiency through teams. But will we see at some point the report that kind of focuses on the mandates, priorities that the government has set, around homelessness and home security and employment and mental health? Is that a future deliverable coming?
No. No, we have no plans to incorporate that into the community development function. Those are such large-scale items by themselves. We would have to, obviously, things such as homelessness is, use that as an example. There's work being done internally based on the few cases we've had so far. We're trying to set up an internal process to be prepared to react when those things do happen. There's no plans to bring forward anything to council unless the situation deteriorates significantly. But yeah, for now, the Community Action Center, it's basically the work that was being done here in a new building with obviously the increased burden of managing an office, which has been, fairly slight, but we see that need growing, people approaching us. So I think where Director Wagstaff was getting at that are the questions being asked is begging the question, should we be doing more? Right now, it's not in the budget nor our mandate to do more, so speaking as the CAO, obviously, not as council, there's no mandate for me to do any more, and nor do I really want to put that on my already at capacity staff at the moment.
Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, no, and thanks very much, and hence my question in anticipation of perhaps a potential future ask around how the budget funding works and everything, because just trying to look down the road, so thank you.
Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we can go back to page 11, or 17 this time, sorry. I just have a quick question here about the Evergreen Center. Not too sure how that works. So there's a operating budget line here. I know we spend money on the maintenance of the building, but I'd like to see or hear if there's another side of the operational expense side, and see if there's a revenue side. So this space is solely used by one particular organization. Do we recover any of our cost of maintaining and operating this facility from revenue generated from the facility, a cost sharing or cost recovery, or is this simply a gift to the organization that uses the facility from the town of Olds?
There is no revenue generation for the town of Olds off of the Evergreen Center.
Does that satisfy your question there, Councillor
Yes,
Cummings?
that's the exact answer I was looking for. I'm just trying to find any of the buildings that we actually own, except for the sports center and the pool, that we actually have cost recovery from or revenue generation from, because it seems like they are all gifts to certain specific community groups or community members. So would like to see some more information like that in these things, that these are purely costs for us, and maybe a further budget discussion, as Councillor Wilson likes to say, about the feasibility of gifting all of our facilities usage rather than cost recovery like most communities. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a very quick question, and further to the discussion on the incident reporting and so on. So we established through Councillor Daly's question that there were no lost time incidents or anything. So I'm assuming, perhaps incorrect of me, that the incidents reporting may have been some small medical aid, but probably mostly property equipment or property damage or equipment damage. Is that a safe generalization, or am I totally off base? Thank you.
You're right on target. They were either minor, which did not result in any lost time other than just the dealing with the stoppage while you had to deal with the incident, and some minor property and equipment damage.
Okay, are there any other questions now? Okay, just before you put a motion on, I just have one question. Thank you. Director Wagstaff, I'm just interested on the comments with regards to the Sunshine Bus and looking at transportation funding or investigating any kind of a grant. I was wondering what the capacity is of the Sunshine Bus to make it a more a public transport bus as opposed to what it's being used for now. What's the capacity there, or is that going to be part of your feasibility, looking at the feasibility of the use going forward?
I can take that one. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The capacity for other uses, 0. There's no 3 seats, 2 seats, and no handrails. So it really is just a one-purpose bus right now.
Thank you very much. That makes answers my question. Go ahead. Thank you, Mayor Dahl. You had a motion you'd like to put on the floor.
Yes, thank you. If you're done, Deputy Mayor Ryan, I so move that council accept the Community Services Quarterly Report for information.
Thank you. Motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We'll move on now to the Office of the CAO Quarterly Report, page 19, 4B.
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor. Quarterly report should be also phrased inaugural report. As council's well aware, but perhaps viewers at home, CAO's office has the 4 department directors reporting to it, but also has a variety of other functions and people. So I thought it would be more efficient and perhaps more structured to form that into one quarterly report. Some things are existing in council's agenda right now on a quarterly basis, such as the policy and organizational review progress updates, and some are kind of new. But to get started here, communications and engagement. So communications obviously has existed for quite a while. Engagement was added as a title this year, and overall things are going well. So to update council on a couple of key items, internal process improvements took up the majority of our, rework this year, what we focused on, how to better communicate interdepartmentally. We had a communication strategy developed that council has been shared with council, which outlines the expectations and responsibilities of day-to-day communication efforts between departments and managers and supervisors, directors, and myself. Branding update, which the PPT that you see before you has been standardized across all departments, and plus the logo update and a few minor changes with font and structure. Large event communications, we have been taking a more proactive role to be prepared and interdepartmentally prepared for large events. And examples that you've seen this year were the vapor testing that has just concluded last week, Oldstoberfest and Coffee with a Counselor sessions. And again, in my opinion, things did work out well from an internal perspective. People understood their roles and what was expected, and the feedback has been relatively positive. And in this case, no feedback is oftentimes good feedback when you're dealing with the public in social media and website settings. So, and engagement, obviously Coffee with the Counselor was engagement, but the Public Art Committee has been officially reformed under administration as per directed by council last year. It just hosted its first official meeting about 2 weeks ago. And we're excited to see where that goes with that group of volunteers. An all clubs meeting has been formed and will meet later this month, tentatively, has met 3 times thus far, making up the 6 larger clubs in town. Minor sports clubs, we're still working with trying to get a better sense of how we can engage on a regular basis with the key minor sports users in town, and the Sportsplex assessment will be a good start with that. And the budget survey. We had a few more responses than last year, but more responses we ever had. And the process itself, again, led by communications, went very well in my opinion. So what's upcoming? Communications policies. Council will be reviewing those in the near future. The large ones are the communications policy and the social media policy. Website rebuilding. We will be taking on a project next year to reformat our website, moving it to a new provider. And service levels, comms and engagement service levels will be, again, forthcoming probably within Q1 of 2024. Economic development, which also under the office of the CAO. Sandra is usually here, but I figured I would take this one as we don't have a lot of new things to report, just updates on ongoing items. New business licenses from January to August were 29 year over year. The 2 immigration programs we are enrolled in with the province of Alberta has significant interest still. The entrepreneur program has had 17 entrepreneurs, we call it service, but essentially contacted and run through the certification process. And 2 have started new businesses and relocated families in town, and 3 are in the queue for final sponsorship by the Government of Alberta, who then works with Immigration Canada. And then the RES program, which is the worker program. Again, 77 total inquiries, 30 applications, 21 approved, 4 in progress, and 1 on hold. So very popular, lots of time commitments, which was anticipated, maybe not to this degree, but ye ask and shall receive. Then on the industrial side, we're working with 3 potential industrial developers, and 2 are currently working on land option agreements with around 224 acres under negotiation at present. Business promotion. If you follow the InvestOld's website and social media, primarily Facebook and LinkedIn, it's looking good. Lots of traffic through there, increasing quarter over quarter. The strategy, it has kicked off in a way. The Brood Committee has been reformed, and that's the committee we have to adjudicate the immigration programs as per the province. So that has been underway for some time now, and we have reps from the college and the chamber and the broader community, as well as some specialized immigration folks on that. And then council will be seeing, of course, at its organizational meeting, the appointments to the EDAC committee. And looking ahead for economic development, those appointments, as mentioned, grant opportunities to help us, A, offset the cost of the ED strategy, and then also hopefully offset the cost of other internal projects and staffing we hope to bring forward in 2024. The housing study is just about complete. I'll be sending a copy of it to council shortly. We are hoping to get just a little bit more data that we have to pay for from the National Real Estate Agency, which name's escaping me at the moment, but just to strengthen a bit. Then we'll be doing a broader kind of social media engagement campaign on what this report means for Olds, what it says, and how that aligns with what the town is trying to do in its development as well. And then a retail gap analysis. We're hoping this will be funded through grants if possible, but if not, regardless, it'll come forward for 2024 budget consideration. A retail gap analysis is a kind of an external study telling us what is our inventory of commercial businesses in town and what are the gaps. What does it make sense for the town to focus on in terms of trying to promote businesses? What kind of businesses could work here based on the population, based on the current services provided, and everything else? So it's something that's valuable, and council will have to decide if it's valuable enough to fund alongside our other needs in 2024 if those grant dollars aren't available. Legislative services, everyone's favorite department, not just because Marcy's sitting right in front of me, but policy reviews. So since the last report on June 5th, council has reviewed and approved the 4 policies in front of you there and rescinded the 4 policies also in front of you below that. No changes to procedures to report, and there are 7 specific council policies that require review in the final 2 years of your term, and we are working towards bringing those to council, but on your, there's some more discussion to be had later in the day on that. And those are just the policies for your information on that spreadsheet. And last thing with Ledge Services, the org review update, 5 changes, actions since last time. The strat plan obviously was passed back in May officially with those more narrow objectives attached to them. The records and information management bylaw was amended. The DEM role was transferred to a town employee. The 2 policies for the fire department and for ME were rescinded. And that we did amend policy 901C for our rec facilities and sports fields. Human resources, we have finished our compensation review and we'll be ready to bring that to council later this month. We're looking the final meeting in October for that. Will be done in closed session, of course. And the benefits review is also finalized, and we are projecting some cost savings and plan improvements going hand in hand, and we'll be finishing that off, hopefully with an announcement to staff this Wednesday, and then council in tandem on what that will look like. Training and professional development. This is something that's been on the books for a while. It was a large piece coming out of both initial staff surveys last summer, 2022 summer, and then in the org review as well. That town staff understood that there were opportunities, funding available for training professional development, but they didn't quite understand how it worked and if their positions were, treated differently than other positions. So what we're trying to do right now, and being led in the office of the CAO with Marcy and Shyla specifically, is to start developing a procedure of what is eligible for PD and training, how we budget for that for each department and eventually to each position, and how we bring those asks to council going forward. Related, but to the next slide, other internal projects, succession planning. These three things haven't started yet, but they do relate to the effort starting with training. That succession planning, meaning that promotion, the ability to be promoted within the organization. We're trying to demonstrate to staff that no one's guaranteed a promotion or a new job, but we want to make sure everyone has the opportunity based on clear metrics to move up in the organization through training and PD when possible. Onboarding orientation, another thing coming out of the staff survey is that people felt both of these processes could be stronger. How new people are brought into the organization. Are they given proper information about the organization, about the town itself, about their jobs, to start work as efficiently and quickly as possible. And then right on down to the nuts and bolts. Is their computer set up on time? Do they have their passwords all ready to go? Do this key fob work? So we're trying to just, again, make that a standardized document that has, just like the communications plans, has clear responsibilities built in of who does what when a new employee is hired for any department. Mountain View Power, also under the office of the CAO. The community grant intake opens tomorrow. So it'll run the length of October. Council will appoint the committee at its org meeting, and hopefully by the second week of November, that committee will meet and adjudicate the applications and recommend to council the $50,000 available for funding. And then council will have that Mountain View Power budget come forward to it for 2024 as part of that, but we're looking still on point. That will be a slight increase in revenue based on our subscriber intakes, but $130,000 per year is what I'm shooting for 2024 allocations. And hopefully, again, more subscribers, more money to give out. And based on the performance, we have 2,823 active accounts, which are roughly 1,500 total customers. Some people have both natural gas and electricity. Most of our subscribers do, in fact. Our churn report, which means how many people come and go. So we're net positive 97 electrical subscribers for this year thus far, and -7 natural gas subscribers. And natural gas is a much more tricky industry because it's not regulated in the same way electricity is. So it's harder to be competitive in that realm because you have to do a lot of upfront risk hedging, if that makes sense. You have to buy your gas upfront, and if you get unlucky with a certain purchase, then your rates are higher than the bigger guys. So promotional efforts. So we will be starting our pre-winter advertising campaign probably just before grant announcements, and then just like we did last year with Mayor Dahl and the big novelty check, once those winners are announced, we'll ramp up that promotional effort to try to get the word out there. And then looking ahead, internal capacity to manage MVP, because it is myself right now, and it's probably better suited with someone a bit more capable and more time on their hands. We have been approached by some community members to help us, to volunteer, to help leverage this asset and work with the community to make it part of their own. And I think any support we can get is appreciated, especially when there's experience and ability available. And then the solar program. This is going to be a winter into spring 2024 project. Solar programs, UtilityNet has closed the solar program because there was such a large intake this year that there's just no more capacity left, because solar, as you're probably aware, sells back to the market once it's generated. So in 2024, we want to be part of that. We want to try to partner with local-ish solar installers, for example, people who install solar panels. and advertise that Mountain View Power does have existing promotions that we, right now for signing up. Right now, it's a $50 rebate off your first bill, but also our rates to sell power back to the grid are 30 cents a kilowatt hour, which is higher than what I'm seeing from places like Direct Energy at approximately 26, 27 cents. So we want to focus on that heavily. And special projects, my office is managing the Sportsplex condition assessment and feasibility assessment. The contract has been awarded, the KDW Architecture and Professional Services. The kickoff is happening this week. My 15 minutes is up. But I'll give myself more time. And $90,000 was the awarded budget out of the $120,000 council made available through the former Destination Knowles Collective Fund. So we're pleased with that, and gives us a bit of room if we have another special project in 2024, but to be discussed later. Housing, we have to submit one grant to the CMHC Accelerator Fund. Well, our second grant after the Rapid Initiative was declined for the emergency shelter. We are meeting with current and future developers in town, potential future developers, I should say. Lots of interest, no shortage, but obviously never easy to get someone to start building homes or apartment buildings in Olds, but it's certainly taking up, dare I say, the majority of my time at the moment, and something that's so needed, I'm happy to allocate as such. The needs assessment has been complete for the province, but as I mentioned to you before, the province has really stepped away from this file, and outside of the one grant through the Ministers of Seniors and Housing has not really come back to the plate. So hopefully we see better uptake from the province since they released that assessment under Premier Kenney. And then the high-density residential discussion paper is attached, which, again, gets a bit deeper into the municipal politics of housing, and hopefully council can have a solid discussion on that. Our solid waste RFP, hot in the heels of our budget survey, apt time to, this was released last week, closing date late October. Lots of interest, lots of questions. We may look at extending it a bit because the more questions we get asked, the more we realize we can make this better. So, but regardless, we still have plenty of time left, and we'll bring that back to council. And vapor testing, completed October 3rd, today? Actually, yeah, tomorrow. I think they actually might have completed it already, but anyways, I'll say tomorrow, sure, so don't want to lie to myself. And several important finds, primarily in, actually no, both newer and older parts of town, unfortunately. So again, it won't solve all our problems, but we more than paid for the study, the effort already, just based on what we found. We have to take some repair measures immediately because some of those repairs were essential to do in the short term before spring sets in. But overall, a project well done. And challenges in learning, so and a lot of this I already covered, but communications and engagement. We are seeing improvements in this area, and we are looking to get better with what tools we have before we bring council the service level or a change to policy. So there is kind of a linear logic to what we're doing here. And then contracted services, we're noticing that it's probably more cost effective to hire the key services such as designers and such as specialized words I'm losing right now, but instead of bringing those services in-house. So that will be more of a contracted services ask in the budget, not significant amounts. They've always existed, but we've been utilizing them more to deliver a better product instead of keeping those more specialized skills in-house. Economic development, again, with the two immigration programs, the capacity issues are significant there. We are going to, that BD coordinator is funded, so we will fill that, but again, we're looking to provide more capacity just through grant funding should it become available. Housing, again, not original role of ED this time last year, but a significant amount of time being taken up with housing, residential developers as well, just because of the need and plus the interest. And the strategy that will, with the help of council and the EDAC committee, that will help hopefully triage our priorities and really focus the department this time next year of what we should be spending our time on. Inflation and budget pressures, again, nothing surprising there. Things are getting more expensive. Our revenue is not growing in near proportion to our cost appreciations. And infrastructure, as I've alluded to before, it's our biggest challenge right now. And that's just the attachment of the full org review, and that's the end of the report.
Thank you, CEO Williams. Certainly a lot of information provided to council. Thank you for this report. It's very, very good. I'll open up to questions from anybody, any of the councillors. Mayor Dahl, and then Councillor Cummings.
Thank you very much for your very informative report. When you say to improve any further, more resources are required, does that stand alone with your comment that we'll be looking at contracting?
Yes, I would say contracting would be the first way to go. We aren't looking at an additional staff right now, but we are getting value out of contracted services, but we have reached our budgetary maximum on that for 2023, certainly.
Thank you. Councillor Cummings.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So your comment about the website in the report, I know the website's been brought up on and off since this mandate started. When you're talking about a new service provider, I'm assuming a new website host, and you're talking about a rebuild of the website, is this something that you are looking to contract out or to do with in-house services?
Our current website is contracted out, and then we have to update it, on a daily basis accordingly, and that won't change. The key issues we have right now is that it's expensive and upgrades are required according to the providers, so the cost feasibility has fallen apart just based on what they want to fix it, let alone what we pay annually. Also, in my opinion, it's not a very functional website for the end user either. I believe there are better options out there for equal or less the cost. So I don't expect it to be a budget paper for council. I believe we can work within what we already budget for a website. But yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you to the CEO. And yeah, thanks very much for the report. Just wondering if you could comment a little bit on how and what the interest rate environment is doing. I'm thinking again on the economic development side. It seems somewhat intuitive to me, the impact, but could you shed any light over the last year what the interest rate environment is doing and in the context of our sales funnel? I assume it's full to the brim and overflowing. And the interrelatedness, a couple things. The interrelatedness, developers coming in here, but we need population, we need a labor force. And for that, we need housing. So in 30 words or less, how's all that working together?
I like a challenge. You're right. To start backwards, it's a catch-22. I'll use commercial attraction as an example. That before a business sets up in Olds, they or anywhere, they want to seek population growth for customers. That what they're going to invest is not going to stay the same for the next 5-10 years. It's going to actually, get better. And Olds doesn't quite have that right now without the growth in housing, which has stagnated. So we are. I believe housing will be the first thing to increase, and that's due to the college's needs largely, and that's what the developers are being driven by, that the college has demonstrable, quantifiable growth and need. The town only has me saying that we have a need, and that's what the housing needs assessment's for. So that's a challenge for the commercial side. The industrial side, they don't see it as such a challenge because their skill set's much more specialized. And it seems that automation, and I don't want to get too deep down a rabbit hole, is taking away a lot of the jobs that either exist or will exist. So you don't see a lot of the 200, 300 employee type of operations for the manufacturing side. We're seeing full-scale $200 million proposals that require 50 full-time employees to work around the clock, which is a very modest workforce from what you'd probably see 20 years ago. On the interest rate side, yes, commercial is getting hit very hard. We're seeing a lot of commercial investors very hesitant and tentative, and that's where things like the retail gap analysis, government can't do a lot, honestly, the municipal government specifically, on improving that because business confidence does not come from government. It can be destroyed by government, but we're not the ones to alleviate that, but I think we can take small steps. On the housing side, this is where the federal government deserves some credit, that the CMHC has, as recently as Friday, has been announcing more and more expansion to their CMHC Select program, and programs like that, where it's low interest guaranteed financing for multi-unit residential builds. And that's what I'm going to say all the developers I've been speaking to plan on applying for, unless they have foreign capital available, which one or two, that seems to be their tract. Money, foreign direct investment coming from largely India and China, or from America to park in Canada. So CMHC is the larger one, because right now you can't borrow for probably less than 6%, I'm going to imagine, for $40 million project, but CMHC can offer as low as, I think, 3.5% to 4.5%. So hope that gets your question.
Thank you. Any other questions? Aside? No? Okay, I do have one question then for CAO Williams. I'm just wondering, with regards to the Mountain View Power, you had mentioned some volunteers possibly to help manage it or sell it, kind of thing. I was wondering if there's any consideration of using some Mountain View Power funding to hire somebody to, under a contract, say, to manage and to grow this.
It has been considered. It's, I guess, where my mind goes, and it's council's ultimate decision. I don't want to dilute what's available to the community too much, because that may affect what, I guess, the public perception of it, that the town is using it to do, its own things. But you're right, we do have to find a way to invest money into it to grow it. And I believe with a little bit of an investment in economic development and the position we already have funded in the business development coordinator, that role can take on at least what I'm doing right now. And then hopefully with the community members who want to see this succeed, which there are several, we can at least get that start. But also that's where my lack of expertise in running an energy retail marketer firm is limited. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Daly, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. A question did come to mind for CAO Williams in regards to just coming out of Alberta Muni's conference, and there was a lot of talk and a lot of, notifications from different ministers and the Premier herself as far as grants that are coming available and so forth. And how many grants do we apply for here at the town, and how many, do we have a percentage that we're successful with? Is there any of that kind of information, data that would be available to us as council to see how we're doing in that field?
We apply for many. I don't have exact numbers at the ready. Is there a specific realm or topic of the grants you're referring to?
No, for when we talk about attainable housing, when we talk about infrastructure, when we talk about community programs, topics like that. It would be interesting to see, for myself anyway, what we apply for, what we're successful with, and what our final outcome is on those as well.
Right. Okay. I think Director Linderman's last quarterly report had some grant information in it of what our grants and procurement coordinator applied for. Our success rate overall is not that great, just because they're so overprescribed. Infrastructure especially, because the government, and if you, in the meeting with Minister McIver last week, one of the key things was that there's not enough avenues available for existing infrastructure. They want us to largely build new infrastructure to fund it, which in a time of economic pressures makes little sense to me. But I think the government speaks a big game and has very little follow-up on what its words actually mean. But yeah, Director Living does report on that, and we can probably add on the success ratio of that. I don't think that was included in there, but fair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Blatz, and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan, and through you to CL Williams. Going back to communications and engagements there, with our communication strategy or our communications, I noted this morning, I just happened to go on the webpage and was just looking around on things for background information for today's meeting, and I happened to notice that under report a problem, bylaws now, they say phone the number, do not do your bylaw report a problems through the report a problem, which kind of came as news to me because I've been telling everybody to use report a problem. And I found that surprising for myself, for my own information. So have we communicated that fully to the general public, that for bylaw issues, this is where we expect them to report, their problems or concerns? Because I don't recall seeing anything, but doesn't mean it didn't happen.
I believe there was a summer push on that when we decided to take the bylaw complaints off report a problem, and of course the large banner at the top of the report a problem page saying to contact the dispatch. Like the dispatch, we've had it for quite some time, and it's a much more, it's integrated with our ticketing system and with our GPS tracking system for our peace officers, and on top of that, sometimes, very rarely, people mistake a municipal concern for what's in fact an RCMP concern. So we don't want to leave something perhaps unattended to for 48 hours or whatever it might be until the office is open, that if it's something the RCMP ought to be dealing with instead of us. So yeah, I do believe there were ads, social media posts sent out. I'll have to check though how successful it's been with the reporter problem. I do monitor report problem myself on a daily basis, so I haven't seen many things except for barking dogs come through, which seem to be the challenge these days. But if there is, we'll up the advertising again. So.
Well, thank you for that, because I unfortunately didn't see anything over the summertime, and I was somewhat surprised myself this morning. So I think then maybe we could do a second push just as a reminder. Wouldn't hurt to keep the lines of communication open to our residents.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you to the CEO. Just a quick question, help me clarify and connect the dots. So previously, we had referred to a business survey for the community that was going to be launched, I think, in October, November. That survey, that's what you refer to as the retail gap analysis, or am I confused and have two separate things in mind?
That is two separate things. The retail gap analysis, we haven't funded it yet. The survey will go out as part of the economic development strategy, probably not in October, because we do want the new committee to steer that process. The gap analysis will be a consultant-led report, so yeah, that hasn't been actioned yet.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion on the floor? Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I make the motion that council accept the Office of the CEO quarterly report for information.
Thank you. There's a motion to accept as information. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move on now to new business. Since we have no bylaws, we'll move on to new business. Page 34, discussion paper, high-density residential changes. CEO Williams.
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor. So this was prepared by myself and with consultation from our infrastructure and planning team, and James is at the back of the room there in case anything gets too tricky or specific for myself. So this is really just to start a conversation that probably won't have many changes forthcoming immediately. But if you follow the news on housing, inevitably in the run of a news cycle, municipal barriers to housing comes up as a topic. And it's not totally fair because housing is a much broader thing than just municipalities. In fact, we have almost nothing to do with housing in relation to higher orders of government and the private sector. But it's also not totally unfair that certain things can certainly influence the capacity and ability and confidence to build residential construction in communities. So I wanted to start with two subjects with multiple things in the second subject to get council discussing it. And if there's more information required, certainly this is not an end of anything or decisions required. It's more of just where to go from here. So the first thing is the existing policy the council passed last year, 1003, which was residential construction incentive policy. There was always a plan, I do believe I communicated to council at that time or shortly thereafter, to add a higher density incentive structure to that policy. Right now, it's only for largely single detached construction, as it's based on the creation of at least 7 lots in a new development that could be, could receive tax abatement for up to 3 years. What this is asking council to consider is putting in 2 things for high-density residential development proposals. First is the same amount of incentive that they can receive up to 3 years of tax abatement on vacant, what we would call R3 lots, at the same amount, in the same way that the current R1 developers do. And the second thing is a 1 year of tax cancellation for the municipal portion of property tax on improvements. So improvements means what is built on a vacant lot. Whether in year 1 they build a foundation and it's only taxed at an extra $40,000 in assessment, or they get the entire thing built and it's taxed at $1.4 million, for example. So they're the 2 proposals for discussion today on 1003. On the land use bylaw, several things that I try to keep brief on purpose, but obviously they can get fairly expansive. And I won't spend a lot of time on either, but I'll just hit at them at a high level. Height maximum relaxation highway districts. Right now our LUB, in my opinion, is very restrictive. You can only build 2 floors in the town of Olds without going to council for variance powers. So council might say, well, you can always come to us, that's fine. However, if you're a business owner, what's your level of confidence before you decide to invest anywheres? Like, am I even going to get approved for this? Should I even buy this land? Should I even spend my time here if they're already at such a low threshold? So the thought is, in the highway district, we already have things like Connect First that obviously was approved with a massive variance from council at one time in the past. We have current interest in the highway district. If you recall the condos behind Grocery Daddies right now, that again, variance powers were required. So I'm proposing that council agree to amending the variance powers, increasing them by 100%, essentially, in the CH and CHA districts, which are all along Highway 2A or 27, and then also allowing the development officer to have height maximum variation powers increased from 15% to 25%. Relaxation of green space minimums in highway districts. This relates to C, so I'll take them together. Right now we have a 15% of any lot needs to have green space. Really nice in the highlands or vistas. In my opinion, totally unnecessary along the highway. When you add that with parking requirements, which are at 1.75 per unit, again, think of yourself as buying a lot. You have to have 15% for green space, which makes you no revenue. Then you have to put in 1.75 parking lots per resident. Again, making you no revenue. So that affects, A, the developer's willingness, ability to build homes. It also affects the affordability, because the fewer units someone can put into a residential multiplex, the higher, the less money they can sell them for. If a 20-unit building has to become a 30-unit building, obviously the cost ought to go down per unit. But if the inverse is true and they have to decrease their footprint based on the green space and parking requirements, those units are going to be more expensive. So that's something that council could change that would directly relate to affordability. Again, in the highway district, I don't see it being a huge issue. We have plenty of setback with existing green space all along Highway 27 and for a large part of 2A. And the ask is that it becomes 0, again, for the CH and CHA districts, and that the development officer be given 50% variation power for green space minimums. And I'll stop there to speak to something that was in the introduction, written, not spoken, that developers don't want to build homes that people don't want to live in. So even though government's job, in a way, is to ensure that we are doing what's right by the community, safety, appearance, aesthetics, etc., there has to be some level of trust that when people are investing millions of dollars to build something, they're not going to want to build something that's ugly or incompatible with existing uses surrounding it, or something that people aren't going to buy. So it's just something with, especially with parking and green space minimums, you have to have some trust, in my opinion, in that private sector. Parking, always a favorite one. So right now it's 1.75 parking stalls per unit of housing. Again, this is perhaps the most picked upon part of municipal barriers to housing. Plenty of good arguments on both sides. I don't want to get there, but I do believe that it's not, oh, that's wrong actually, sorry. So the recommendation was changed, and I guess we did not update it. The recommendation administration's making is that it be set at 1 to 1.25 ratios. So not 1 to 1 stalls, 1 to 1.25. So that is an error in the package right there. It's not 1 to 1, and my mistake. So we want recommending that in high-density residential areas, R3 lots, that the parking requirement be reduced from 1 to 1.25. Then secondary suites. Again, we do allow them, but somewhat restricted. Absolutely not allowed in the R3 districts, and then restricted on the type in R2 districts. And since these are new, would be affect only new secondary suites, the recommendation is to allow them in all land use residential districts. And they are the cheapest and quickest avenue to obtain more affordable housing in the community. So it can be done in all new builds. It can be done with some pain in existing builds, of course, depending on the location, but adding garage and garden suites to our ability in R2 districts, and then opening up the R3 districts as well, will provide room for the private sector to give us solutions instead of us trying to give them solutions. So that's that.
Thank you, CEO Williams. I believe there's lots of information here for us to discuss, so I'm going to open it up to questions. We'll go to Councillor Blatz and then Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan, and through you to CEO Williams. I mean, overall, this is a lot of information, and I appreciate what you've brought forward, and I do recognize the need that we have within our community for more housing, more attainable housing, and more or affordable housing, however you wish to describe it. And I think that this is something that you've said, that is council open to making some or all of these proposed changes, but I'm a little concerned about the parking. That's my biggest issue, particularly in an R3 place, or you take like Destination or Destiny, they're direct control industry or areas, but they would have to automatically come back. But I mean, parking is at maximum in those types of areas already. You know, places like Hawthorne, that roadway is very narrow, parking's already becoming an issue. And even Sierra Close up there where they've got, I think it's R3 where all those fourplexes are. There's been several complaints there. So I think that's something council really needs to give a fulsome consideration to, and perhaps, as you've said, maybe open it up to individuals or developers who want to bring us a solution on how this could work as compared to us making the solution. But I really want and ask council to give some consideration to those issues, because I really think that that could become a problem down the road, pardon the pun.
Okay, perhaps, I'm just going to put it out there before I take your question. Councillor Cummings is, does everybody want to deal with these things individually for discussion? And we can go through each section one by one, or just throw it open for questions all over? What's the feeling? Councillor Walsh, what do you think?
Yeah, I would just throw it open for questions on all of it, otherwise we'll be here all night.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Cummings, you're next in line, and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll start with height. I'm all for changing the height restrictions on the zoning. The CH and CHA, I assume, are just Highway 27 and Highway 2A. But I would do two things a little bit differently. One, screw the variance altogether, just change the land use bylaw to 20 meters in those zones, period. And then have your 25% variance there. We want 4-story construction in the town because we've been a 2-story town for long enough. It's time to expand to be that 4-story town. We seem to be perfectly happy as a council today and previously to grant these variances, so I'm just happy with having it a 20 meters with the authority having 25% variance capabilities. But I'd also include 50th Avenue to 51st Avenue, 46th Street to 54th Street, the uptown area. We've talked about commercial main floor, residential upstairs, a lot, especially when we were talking about 2A a couple meetings ago. That seems to be a trend in a lot of downtown cores now, is to bring people to downtown and have more residencies downtown. 4 stories, if you go back and you walk into the co-op today and you take a look at some of the pictures from the turn of the century and the 20s and the 30s, you'll see 4-story structures in uptown. I don't know when we went to 2 stories all of a sudden, but I would like to see 4 stories in there as well. Most of those buildings are dilapidated and falling apart as they are. I know when I rent is falling apart. Love to see 4 stories in there. That's just where I think that more growth can go in the vertical manner and preventing urban sprawl. But I'd rather see the land use bylaw just change to 20 meters, at least in the 2 highway zones. I agree with Councillor Blatz about the parking, though, especially in residential units. Commercial, I don't care, let the businesses deal with that. They'll develop as many parking lots as they feel necessary for their businesses to survive on. But we do live in a rural community without public transportation. I have one adult child living in my home who doesn't even have a driver's license, and for some reason I have 3 vehicles at my house most of the time. It's unrealistic to expect Albertans in a rural setting like Olds to have less than 1 vehicle per person of adult age, driving age in our community. So dropping it down to 1.25, although it seems really good, and I think in a lot of larger urban settings with public transportation that's more realistic, but in our area it's not so realistic. And I think we had this discussion in relationship to the college, where someone had said college kids don't drive, and that got quite a giggle amongst all councillors as we realized that's not true at all here. But I do agree that if there's whatever restrictions we have on commercial units and parking spaces, that can go out the window. I don't care. Businesses will dictate that because no business wants to have no parking for their customers. But residential, I'm really leery on that. I'm a little confused at how R3 residential units could have secondary suites, simply because they're 4-plexes, 8-plexes, and above, in my mind, is what R3 is. I'm pretty sure townhouses are R2s, but go ahead. If you can squeeze in a resident or a secondary suite into an R3 property, all for it. The more residential suites, the better. I think the communities themselves will make it harder to develop those than if they want them to be that challenged and that difficult to build. But the height part is my biggest key in getting that up. And remember that the redensification of urban centers, i.e. the uptown core, is the goal of a lot of communities in preventing urban sprawl, and I'd like to see that included in that highway district change of height.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you to the CAO. As a general comment, I am in favor. I support removing the hurdles, the impediments. We talked earlier about the need for housing. We've all agreed and recognized that. And again, I think picking up on some of your comments, and unless I've heard wrong, understood wrong, none of these initiatives, if and when they get through, would be the Willy Wonka golden key, but would represent an enhancement to our toolbox to hopefully attract investment and development residentially. I do share the comments and the concerns around parking and that ratio. We hear enough from various folks around traffic enforcement and speed on our roadways, people referring to their streets as raceways. And I just wonder about from the safety aspect. We all know we have snow 6-7 months of the year as a further complicating factor, so I do side and echo the comments that have been made around increasing more or using more on-street parking. We also know just about everybody in town here, if you're living in Olds, you've got a car, a truck, a vehicle. Could you just clarify for me on the policy 1003 and the tax holiday, for what I'll call it? Because we do know there's the sliding scale, the 3-year sliding scale. Can you clarify for me how that works with the one additional year? Just what that means, how that works?
Theoretically, it would be a 4th year or in the middle of the 3-year time frame. Whenever the improvement gets taxed, at present, in the present policy, that's when they become ineligible for the grant program. So right now it's for vacant lots that developers are sitting on trying to sell. So they lose that tax incentive if A, they sell the lot to another party, or B, they start building a house on that lot. For this one, it doesn't have that trigger, that as long as they retain ownership of the lot and they start building on it, they can receive up to 1 additional year of tax incentive on the municipal portion of the property taxes, on the improvement portion as well. Just the sliding scale somewhat ends at that point. So once it becomes taxable, they get 1 year of, let's say, lot and improvement taxation for free. And where it says the CA will have discretion, because it's just easier than trying to codify it in policy. My idea is that once it becomes a revenue-generating potential, they ought not to get any tax incentive on that. If they can't sell it, it might be their own fault. But that is how I see it working right now.
Mayor Dahl?
I think Harvey was next, and then I'll go after Harvey. Sorry.
No, actually,
All right.
you were next. I already
Okay,
have you
thank
written
you.
down.
Thank you very much. I have no problems with A or B. I somewhat agree with the parking relaxation. I believe that most of the homes in Olds do have garages already with cars in them and then in their driveways, and if they have more that they want to have on the street, well, that's between the families. But the areas that don't have garages, yes, we have to be able to accommodate them for sure. So there will be specific special areas that we may have to work at. Otherwise, if you want to have 4 or 5 cars, then that's your family decision. Secondary suites, just remind me again, basement suites that are allowed, do they all have to have an exit door?
Yeah, that's where the provincial safety codes and the fire codes come into play, that they do have to have secondary egress into them and windows for egress as well. So, and that's beyond our control, obviously. But this is largely aimed at new builds. And when Councillor Cummings talks about R3, you look at row housing, which again, I'm not bringing this to you because I just thought of it yesterday. I'm bringing it because people are bringing it to me and saying, this is a problem in Olds. This is a problem in Olds. This is a problem in Olds. Just because anyone doesn't like anything doesn't mean it's not a real issue. So, yeah, that's it.
And I basically would have to say that I agree with pretty well all of your proposed changes. However, parking, as Councillor Blatt stated, we have to be a little bit cautious of certain areas in town.
Thank you. Councillor Daly? Oh, so Councillor Walsh?
Yeah, first one, clarity on the high-density residential development stream. Are you talking, when you say accommodate more than 4 individual resident units? I know at 4, 5, the building code kicks in a different requirement, which is much more expensive. So some clarification on that one. Maximum height relaxation, I have no problem with it. I think it's prudent to give the development officer that 100% variance, because there are times when a 4 it's going to create shading and issues for residents behind it, so I'm happy with that. Relaxation of green spaces, yep, I'm fine with that. Parking, again, I think you give the development officer the discretion here. I have no problem with it. I know when you're talking multi-unit housing, we're not talking huge families, and lower parking stalls per unit may be worthwhile considering. Secondary suites, yeah, I pretty well agree with most of these proposals.
Sorry. Yeah, you had a question at all?
Yeah, just, are we targeting more than a 4-unit complex is my question on that.
Yes, a good question to clarify. 4 units, basically a fourplex and below, and I guess my definition, as for all intents and purposes, is not considered under this. Where it changes, though, is at stories. Anything above, I want to say 3 stories. In fact, that's where fire suppression elevators come into play. This is just for units in the building. So for any like fourplex units or duplex units or triplex units wouldn't be eligible. But if it's anything above that, I've never seen a sixplex before. I'm sure they exist, but that would be eligible, for instance. It is somewhat arbitrary, to be fair. It's just, you have to have a line somewheres. But anything bigger than a fourplex, which are still generally 1 to 2 stories. So.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. I really appreciate what's come forward here in light of us trying to reduce the red tape and trying to build confidence in developers to come to our community and invest the money in attainable housing and or alternate housing solutions. So I agree with A, B, and D. C, the the parking relaxation. That seems to be the contentious item in most communities now when it comes to parking. I know even in my community, the neighbor had company and they actually texted me and said, hey, you don't mind if I park it on the street in front of your place? I said, no, it's a public street. Please help yourself. But I think that, it's an item within the communities of Olds that people are a little bit protective of. And so when I look at the 1.75 parking stalls per unit, the way it sits now, I'm not quite sure what a 0.75 of a car looks like and that they drive down the street, but I know it's a ratio that they're using. Is there some way that we could work into this, a way that the developer, if they come up with a better idea, innovative parking solution or something within their development, that we might be able to give them a benefit of some sort of community break from the town. And what I'm thinking of is like community parking lots, things like that will assume or, grab these extra cars that people have and that they take them off the street and put them into a parking lot somewhere. I know parking lots aren't the most desirable thing in communities, but if we're looking at these smaller square foot houses and half lots and stuff like that, the convenience of having a vehicle park on those lots is not reality. They're going to be on the street or in a ground level garage underneath the residence or what have you. And so I just think to keep the streets cleared for what we talk about with safety and with snow clearing and so forth, need to come up with something a little bit different than just assuming everybody's going to park on the street. Just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. Go ahead, CEO Williams.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and to Councillor Daly's point and a few other points. I'm not sure if you noticed the influx of international students lately. How many of those people drive, do you figure?
Not many.
Absolutely.
Not many.
So go back to maybe Councillor Walsh's suggestion, maybe more pragmatic, that giving the development officer significant more variance powers on that based on the type of development could be a better way forward. But the nature of housing is changing as well. At 1.75 for, let's say, a one-bedroom apartment, is that always going to be necessary? And you're right, a .75 car driving down the road is, you don't really see it too often. When you take that law of averages as well, that if you have a 30-unit building, for example, with a third of those one bedrooms, a third of those two bedrooms, and so on and so forth, the law of averages ought to work out. And you're right, we don't have public transportation full scale yet, and it'll be some time before we get there. I go back to a previous comment, combined with perhaps adjusting it from a blanket relaxation to a increase in variance. But the private sector, not only do we need to kind of give them the confidence to invest money before they spend a dollar, which again, seeing parking requirements at 1.75 is a problem for some developers, no question. But you also have to trust that they don't want to sell apartments or sixplexes to people who own 3 cars and can't park them there, that there's some private market, free market considerations that will work themselves out. And yeah, it's certainly a risk, of course. You see some poor planning decisions that were made the last 30 years in some communities, and not just in Olds, everywhere, and parking is a clear thing of that. But the housing issue is not going to get any easier. It's going to get much worse. The college, in fact, if you even read their strategic plan, this year, they plan to bring in 200 more students this year. They plan on 200 more next year and 200 more the year after. Where are those people going to live? So this is what this is meant to do. It's nothing revolutionary. It's taking from what other people are trying to grapple with right now. So the 1.25 I do think is reasonable, but of course it's 100% in council's court. The variance power is also an avenue to get there. The only thing that does is doesn't quite give that upfront certainty, I guess, to developers. They do have to apply. It is a $100 fee as well, which is another kind of red tape measure. Even see houses in the Highlands, for example, they're all over 2 stories technically based on the measurement. Every single house that's built there has to get a $100 variance permit applied for and approved by our development officer. That's not how we should be encouraging businesses. So it's coming from a much more holistic sense than just high density residential apartments. But think of it, 600 more international students in Olds by 2025. And what does that look like? So again, not a conversation we'll solve today, but hopefully enough to get you started.
Thank you for the comments, CEO Williams. And Councillor Cummings has a question.
Yeah, sorry, when I was flipping my page there, I forgot to read out my notes for section 2B, the green spaces on the highways. One thing I'd like to see about this 15% is not just waiving it, saying there you don't need it, but to convert it from green space to offsite levy or something like that, that can go into a fund where we can then build a community facility of some kind outside of that. If people want to live in concrete palaces, I'm happy with that. And again, there's a blurring here for me between commercial and residential and commercial residential. You build a strip mall, no green, I'm good with that. You're not going to sell a lot of houses or apartment buildings that don't have a shrub or a bush in front of it, so that's up to the builder, like you had commented. But if we could take that 15% need that's right now, the requirement, and turn it into a dollar amount that goes into a fund that can then be used to beautify the community over a period of time. Like we have talked in the past about these offsite levies. I'm not sure if I'm using the right term in converting this 15% to that. But we found we are having difficulty right now, like you've said, about finding a school site because we are not taking into consideration that space requirements for stuff like that from developers properly. But if there's dollars instead of space, then the dollars can be converted to a space somewhere else, even outside of that community that's being built. So rather than just taking this to zero, I would rather see it be converted into a dollar amount moving forward. I think that would work really well. And considering one of the last comment there, if the college is bringing 600 more students, who wants to open a tent business with me anyway? Tent business.
CEO Williams.
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor. Sorry, I didn't speak to Councillor Daly's initial comment he made about parking lots. We do have that envision only in the Uptown District, that the development officer can use street or nearby parking lots that the town owns to fulfill parking requirements. So that only exists there. Elsewhere, the town doesn't own that many parking lots, so it would be tough to do elsewhere. But it does exist if the opportunity arises. To Councillor Cummings' point as well, that's called cash in lieu. It is possible. So.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Daly.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just to respond to your comments, I was, of course, with parking at an apartment building, there's usually, a certain number of spaces available, and usually it's one space per unit or whatever, because of, the people that are living there don't usually have more than one vehicle as being a one tenant. What I was thinking of more is like the fourplexes, the duplexes, the half lot houses and such as those ones. And maybe what we need to look at is a sliding scale for what is required for ratio of parking as compared to unit. Where an apartment, we would look at a 1-to-1, where if we're looking at maybe a duplex or something like that, we're looking at a 1-to-2 or something like that. It'd be hard to put on everything a 1 to 1.25 ratio on every development that we do in this town, because I think that doesn't fit. And I think we need to look at maybe being a little bit more flexible with that, depending on what the construction project is. That's basically what I was getting at there with that. So, thanks, Brent.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you to the CEO. Just a quick question, and correct me if I'm totally off base. Perhaps I am. I know you'll correct me. Is this not a little bit of a catch-22 in the sense that, so if we have green space, the water is going into the soil, into the ground, and if we take away that green space and we have vacant lot and we're going to build a 4-story now higher density building, we are going to tax an already overtaxed below ground infrastructure. Correct, or am I totally off base?
You're not safe. It's going for video review. No. So it's why it's in the highway districts. Every one of those lots, I believe, in my opinion, can be drained to the existing infrastructure on the highway. Our sanitary system's maxed. Our storm system is just fine. That's why it wouldn't make sense to expand this green space relaxation to zero in, let's say, Miller Meadows, because we know there's a significant stormwater rationale there. But the highway has capacity. It has the infrastructure in place. Everything essentially drains to those catch basins. The main line runs in that direction along Highway 27. So there's might be a few caveats in there, like in 2A, for example, in the south. All those area structure plans call for what's called on-site retention of stormwater, similar to what you see like in Winter Lake, which is the same thing. It's an on-site retention pond, essentially. We just call it something fancier. So that's why this recommendation is only for the highway district. The capacity is there, and everything is graded appropriately. But and same thing, no one wants to build a property and then have insurance claims for water either. So we're confident in the ability.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? All right, I guess I'll speak to this then. I'm fine with the recommended changes that you're talking about with regards to policy 1003. As for the other items on page 36 here, land use bylaw, I'm fine with the height restrictions and the green space. I would suggest that we would probably address some of that green space, though, in as conditions, perhaps landscaping, you need a tree here or there. So that could also come underneath the conditions of the development permit. Parking relaxation, I agree with what council has said with regards to parking. I do like the idea that Councillor Daly had suggested with regards to having a different parking requirements depending on the type of housing. So you would have higher compare in areas where you have duplex or fourplex, and then 1-to-1 ratio perhaps in some of the apartments that we're looking at trying to get. You would find that more of the attainable and affordable. You talked about one bedroom. I'm actually thinking studio apartments for students, and certainly a lot of those students that would go into apartments would not, as you mentioned, not necessarily have cars I know students do have cars around town, and that's not to say that they don't, but some of the foreign students certainly do not at this point anyway. So I'd like to see some kind of a scale being developed there that would be, sort of address some of the parking concerns that get raised. On the secondary suites, you say, you talk about R3 and R2, but what about R1? Sorry, go ahead, Sierra Williams, because my concern about R1 is I wouldn't want to have to start just allowing a full-scale secondary suites with R1, simply because of parking and the constraints in those areas are a little bit different.
Right, and I may have to look to James, but it is permitted in R1 right now. But obviously, parking requirements are added for any additional secondary suites that's approved. We do rely on on-street parking largely, though, which is not a clear formula as compared to a driveway or parking lot. But R1 is blanket approval right now, assuming safety codes, parking, and fire codes are met.
Thank you very much. I wasn't sure whether it was a permitted or discretionary use in R1, and I kind of remember seeing it there, so I wasn't sure. So thank you for the clarification. So I'm good with what some of the other items. The other thing really is the parking with regards to maybe coming up with a plan that would be a little bit more fulsome for our community and address some of the parking concerns that get raised to us all the time. Okay, so any other questions that may have arisen from what I just said or from any other counselors? I'm seeing none. Can I get a motion then, please? Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. I move that council accepts the discussion paper on high-density residential changes as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion from Councillor Blatz. All in favor of that motion? And that motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move on now to council meeting reduction, page 37, 6B. CEO Williams?
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor. So this is something Council has discussed previously, and it centers around making the most efficient use of Council and staff time. So there's a few recommendations in place that focus on this meeting, policies and priorities, and the idea that we could either eliminate the meeting itself and make regular council meetings longer, or move to a different schedule, largely bi-monthly, for the PMP meetings. So to reiterate council, but also inform the viewers that there's some key issues we have right now, largely around administrative capacity with turning around PMP meetings to regular meetings, and the overall time commitment that having 3 meetings plus a more informal CEO conversation takes on a monthly basis. In administration's time, it's much more efficient to prepare for, say, 1 longer meeting than 2 shorter meetings. And then from the mechanics of how we've been restructuring the reports to council, that now we're on quarterly reports, they can be managed much more efficiently and time allocated effectively to presenting council that information and budgeting sufficient time for it. And same thing with reports, changes to delegations and citizen reports, and also to council reports as well. And smaller things like proclamations that have been addressed already. There was a recommendation attached that sounds a bit harsher than it is. This came up last time we spoke about this, that the current PMP bylaw is not quite matching what PMP actually is. So what this recommendation is actually referring to is that perhaps the November PMP not go ahead, or if it can be done in time, an ad hoc committee be struck to reformat that bylaw, potentially look at those 6 outstanding policy, council policy items that have been kind of laggard for a little bit now, and then come back to council with a report and work to do. But the ball is in council's court. There's kind of few options there, plus that recommendation, but hopefully that explains it well enough.
Thank you, CEO Williams, for your presentation. And I already have a question. Hands up for Councillor Blatz. Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan, and through you to CEO and to council, giving this a considerable amount of, consideration. a couple of suggestions I'd like to possibly pose to both administration and to council. That at this point in time, the bi-monthly council policies and priority meetings, I can agree with, option 2 or 3. Although I'd like to see maybe 6 meetings held, because previously it's always been the deputy mayor who has chaired those meetings. If we had 6 policy and priority meetings, then each one of us would have an opportunity to chair a meeting. A recommendation would be to possibly align it with the current policy, is to maybe make this called a council of, or committee of the whole meeting, rather than council policy and priorities. And then the other recommendation I thought of is perhaps maybe moving the CAO council conversation to a bi-monthly format as well, an alternate month to what the policy and priority meeting is, because as it states under the MGA Section 207, that the CAO's responsibility is to advise council, is to advise and inform council on the operation of and affairs of the municipalities. And this gives us, as a council, the opportunity to speak to our only employee, which is the CAO, in an informal discussion and information sharing session. And then, as there are no decisions made at that meeting as well, but it does give us an opportunity to share that information. So I think if council would be agreeable to considering that, I think that's an option we could maybe give administration to bring back to council at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't want to see the removal of PMP. I think it's too important of an activity or process, and I'm going to just read what I wrote here. I would rather us see a review of what PMP is, what it should be by our own bylaw, and I think that was mentioned again. We aren't really following our bylaw. We've simply made another council meeting but not empowered it to do anything. But I'd also like to see what it ought to be as an empowered committee of the whole. We can give powers to committees to make decisions on our behalf through bylaw and through policy. And when I did my research on the other communities in our group, that 10,000 plus size communities, they do all have a organization, a committee of the whole. They have several different names, but they're all a committee in which council sits down and does work. A council meeting is a place where we sit down and make decisions, but a committee is where we can sit down and do the nuts and bolts and get some work done. This has turned into a council meeting where no decisions are made. It's on camera, we have media, we've got public, it's constraint, and it's not what a committee is supposed to be like. It's not how work is getting done by a committee. And none of the ones I found are set up like that. They're not, they all have minutes, absolutely, because they're a committee of the whole, but none of them are open to the public. None of them have presentations being brought in from just regular stuff. That's stuff for council meetings. And I think what was mentioned by Wanda there, or Councillor Blatz, is, and by the CAO, is that maybe we need to put an ad hoc committee together to redevelop what this is, to make sure that we're doing this the most efficient way. And that requires us to do some research on what other communities are doing, find the best path forward, and give us an empowered committee to get work done so that council meetings don't have to be 6 hours long while we debate endlessly a bill or a bylaw that's come up to us, that we can present a more formulated bylaw because we've looked at it, which is what our bylaw for the PMP committee meetings already asks us to do during PMP meetings, is to do the work of developing policy and bylaws. So I'm more in favor, before we even contemplate the changing of how we're going to meet, is to change what the purpose of this meeting is and how it can be structured to best work with administration and council to get work done more efficiently in the overall process of what council should be doing.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. Councillor Wilson.
Oh, sorry. It's been a long morning, long afternoon. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just my brief comments. I concur. I like the recommendation to suspend the PNP meetings for now, create this ad hoc committee, and do a complete review of our process and the bylaw and everything. I guess at the end of the day, I'm motivated by, and I haven't used the terminology lately, but quick, nimble, agile. And I would say that we aren't, as a collective group, all that quick, nimble, agile in terms of moving things forward. I do see a redundancy between the CAO conversation and the PNP. I do advocate for keeping the CAO conversation because it tends to be more informal, as was previously stated. I'm not sure the collective effort that goes into the CAO conversation, agenda, and discussion, but I presume it's a much more smaller, compact group than the collective effort that's needed to prep for a PNP meeting. I look at the PNP meeting, and even if you go to a bi-monthly, whether it's 5 or 6 meetings a year, there's going to be, to some extent, still a doubling up of the effort, I think, and the complete administrative staff from the legislative clerk and others. So I'm all about becoming more efficient, looking at better ways to utilize the time of the staff and of ourselves. I'm okay with the recommendation. It says to suspend the PNP meeting, let's do a complete review, and then go from there. Thanks.
Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. And I would agree with comments made by Councillor Wilson, as well as I would add on to those qualities that we're trying to attain is also transparency. And so I would agree that that we would look at revamping the PNP so that they are more efficient and they are doing more with what they're supposed to be doing, as well as I believe that Councillor Blatt's comments, and I put some thought into this as well, is that we look at every second month being a PNP and the other alternative month being a CAO conversation. I think that would alleviate some of the human resources pressures that CAO Williams has mentioned, but I'm not on the internal workings of the office, so I leave that for him to decide. But I do believe that these meetings do have a purpose, and I believe that as far as if citizens of Olds are concerned or want to get up to date on what's coming to council and what is on the burner, I think that we need to keep the PNP in place to keep them informed as well. So before a council meeting happens. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. We'll go to Councillor Walsh and then Mayor Dahl.
Yeah, I'm all for no council policy and priority committee meetings. As I recall back when we had evening meetings, PNP was introduced to prevent that time in the evenings when we were maybe pushing things with reports and that. So in a way, this is incrementalism. PNPs got moved to afternoon. Council meetings got moved to afternoon. My days are used up 4 or 5 days, Mondays, just say Mondays. I'm more than happy to spend a little bit more time at council meetings to get the business done. And so giving up PNPs makes a lot of sense to me because it's not serving the purpose it was originally intended to do. If you want to look at an ad hoc committee to talk about a committee of the whole twice a year, quarterly, I don't know, but trying to replace the PNP with something else is more time and more effort to put in. It's always going to take staff time. Doesn't matter what meetings we create, it's going to take staff time. And if you want to reduce staff time, just get rid of PNP totally. That would be my input.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl.
Thank you very much. It's been good conversation around the table. I really appreciate that. I like the recommendation. I do agree with the fact, I was going to pick option 1. I do agree with the fact and that we could suspend this and have a review committee to go over the bylaws and make sure that's exactly what we want to do. If we didn't have a PNP meeting, and like Council Blatt said, we can, and other people around the table, we certainly could do the 6 a year, either or. if we didn't have it and council was concerned about not being able to chair a meeting, I would be happy to do a rotation with council, and I would only do one and they would do one. But good conversation around the table.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Are there any other comments people would like to make? Okay, well, I would just concur, I think, with Councillor Blatz and the idea of shifting PMP to 6 times a year, but I also think that perhaps it might be necessary to look at this and revamp it so that we are doing some more fulsome work during PMP, and it could possibly be that we switch it to a committee of the whole and become more work-related that Councillor Cummings had mentioned. Certainly, there is need to change in order to, because it is taxing on our staff, and we want to be more efficient all the way around. So I'm not sure whether or not the recommendation that you're asking for, CEO Williams, is you're looking for an option plus the recommendation, or just to suspend PMP right now and then in the meantime create this committee, or maybe it could be a council committee to sit down and discuss how we want to go forward and what we want to do to look at the bylaw, and then also all other policies as well. So maybe you could just clarify that for me.
Yeah, and that's fair. Now, in hindsight, I've realized I could have structured this a bit more clearly. I guess first thing, this is 100% council's obviously decision. That I don't want to try to influence in any way outside of stating what I feel is the reality. I think at bare minimum, I think council does need to talk about the issue, and a ad hoc committee seems to be the easiest because we have this existing bylaw that could be looked at a bit further, and a couple other policies if you wanted to do that at the same time, and bring back for future discussion. The options are just there as discussion purposes. So obviously there's multiple variations or options 5, 6, 7 that have been proposed already today. So yeah, it's totally within the realm. But I would say at bare minimum, I would recommend council strike an ad hoc committee to review the current bylaw, and then that may be a good segue into the broader conversation as opposed to this onslaught of information and caveats that I gave you today.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, Councillor Blatz, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. Just a point of clarification here, but really, we can't strike an ad hoc committee today because we would have to bring this back to a regular council meeting, correct?
Yes, that's correct. We can direct administration. to
Okay,
bring
that's
back.
what I was looking for clarification on. Thank you.
And perhaps one way of doing it would be to, when it comes back, is striking an ad hoc committee to deal just specifically with the bylaw. And those who are on that committee, we would have, we would look at probably 3 councillors or whatever and the mayor, and then have another committee that would, or unless you want to do it all, but another committee would look at the policies so that we're being fair within the amount of workload being placed on council. So, and even it out, if you want to, is what I'm saying. So perhaps what we could do would just take a look and say a motion to bring back this item for consideration at a future council meeting. Would that be doable? Okay, thank you. So can I get a motion with regards to that? Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. I move that council discuss the meeting reductions and the options provided and bring this back to a future council meeting.
Thank you. Is that clear for everyone? All right, all in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you very much, and good discussion all around on that item. I appreciate that. And we'll move on now to number 7, the Chief Administrative Officer's Report, page 39. CEO Williams.
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor Ryan. And a few things. We'll start with the Winter Drive speed stats. If you recall, back in June, July perhaps, I presented the initial data set when the camera was out there. At first, council requested that it be placed back there. first week of September, which it was. Brief preface to this. Our 2 radar signs are drastically over age, and they do not report data on a regular basis. So we had to leave it out there for an extended amount of time just to get 40 hours. The solar panels are not working as well as they once did, and then the data collection device also experiences problems. But we did get 40 hours worth of data between September 5th and 8th, which were all when school was in session. The big takeaway from this is that Winter Drive has a significant amount of vehicle traffic. It was never quite designed for this amount, but when you look at the area structure plans, mainly to the north, that were never quite executed, and perhaps to the south to a lesser degree, that's the reason that Winter Drive has become more of an arterial road than its original collector intake. However, my opinion is that speed is not an issue there whatsoever. Far less than 1% of vehicles are even over the 50-kilometer threshold. And when you look at a ticketability, if that's a word, standpoint, perhaps 6 would qualify based on what our peace officers and even the court systems do hold up for clear enforcement of speed infractions. But I won't get too much into it. I'll leave it at the end till questions, but that's that. The second thing, there was a gas leak in town last week. It happened outside the Evergreen Center. It was a contractor error, essentially, that before, even though a first call was done, generally there is, you find the gas line prior, and to my understanding that was not done. So the excavation began before the hydrovac began. So it was struck, and the area was evacuated by the fire department, and that contractor will be receiving a bill for the fire department's response in correspondence to the time spent on scene. But it was, ATCO did a great job as usual. They rectified the situation in short order, and there was no significant project delays or damage to other property or persons. And I went through vapor testing already in my OCA report, and that was my third and final thing. I'll just leave that where I left it last time, but council will be receiving a report once we have the finalized version from that contractor. So, thank you.
Thank you, CEO Williams. Mayor Dahl.
Thank you for the update on Winter Drive and the speed update. I would just ask at this time, we did have a very active group. Will your administration be sending this update to that group?
Yes, that's the intention once council had time to review it and ask questions, or if it needs to, provide direction.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to the CAO. It doesn't, so I respect the comment and the opinion around perhaps there'd be 6 ticketable offenses here in this 4-day window. But you did reference the volume at 1812 in this 4-day period. What was it designed for? I guess, do we know as far as?
No, I don't have those stats handy, but it's something we could generally pull out of our engineering guidelines. But it's from the school and the lack of access from any other route besides 70th Avenue into Briegel and Holy Trinity. It's fairly evident, but I don't have the exact stats on that.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and supplemental, and certainly CAO, I do respect your interpretation of the data, and then is it safe to say then that from our protective services under director, his recommendation would be there's not a speed concern element here, and I do know, and then Mayor Dahl referred to a group of the local citizens that are quite passionate about this, and hence probably not a need for any type of other mitigation other than some targeted traffic enforcement and not perhaps a playground or anything else?
Correct. That's the recommendation, that we maintain the status quo.
Councillor Platts.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan, and through you to CEO Williams. When you state status quo, though, we would still monitor the traffic, even put up our traffic speed monitors board, yeah. We will still do that, just to remind people to keep their speed, at a reasonable level.
Yeah, well, what we do right now, we can continue doing. The trailer can't operate in winter, mainly due to its age and the lack of sunlight, so it can't. Whether a full-time device on the pole is necessary. We do have a couple of requests that we're trying to figure out how best to interpret them. For example, the crosswalk on 54th Street from the trail into 53rd Avenue. That is a common request for flashing lights or speed cameras, et cetera, there. But we do have to determine, I guess, the efficacy of spending $10,000 one time and then repair and maintenance and replacement of those devices before we just start replacing them wherever people feel there's a problem. I understand that there's been incidences of, trees hit and perhaps a dog hit. But besides speed, obviously there's things like distracted driving under the influence that, it's just as likely as anything else. So it's really tough to say that people don't have a valid concern. It's just compared to other areas, but when you take the volume into consideration, yeah, we will continue doing what we do in such high traffic areas, and enforcement too is a big thing. And ME does travel that street because of the school zone on a daily basis. It has set up at various times, but there's just not traffic exceeding the speed limit there. So,
Thank you. Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I love data. Presentable data that we can sit here and say, this is what we've seen, and this is how we're basing our decisions on when it comes to that stuff. I also appreciate your comment when you said, is there really a problem, and can we justify then spending this much capital expenditure on a problem that doesn't exist? Volume is volume. There's nothing we can do about that, really. The design is there already. It's already built. So unless we're willing to build some more roads in their immediate future, the overall transportation master plan does call for some different roads in that area, but until we get houses built and structures built and that land developed, there's not much we can do about it. So I would actually encourage seeing more of this data come our way. Members of our community have, as Councillor Wilson said, come to us and talk to us about various communities that they feel is anecdotally a problem. I've spoken to Director Andrews several times about the reality of the dangers of the roads in Olds, and they're very, very safe roads, as we have very few incidences on our roads, especially incidences involving people and vehicles. And the only way that councillors like ourselves can attest to these realities is by seeing this data and saying to these concerned citizens, well, we've seen the data, and the data doesn't support an investment in that particular area of town. So I would actually ask to see more of this data as it becomes available. Simple enough to throw in a little pie chart showing is that there really isn't a lot of speeding in the town, or maybe there is on this particular avenue, and that's why the police are there, the MEs are there and not elsewhere. Don't want to give the speeders a heads up, but I don't think very many of the speeders are watching council meetings anyways. But I would like to have that data at our fingertips that we can then expose the realities of why we aren't spending a lot of money. You did mention one thing there, the signposts. I noticed that when I was in Edmonton driving around the other day, they do have quite a lot of those speed signs with the embedded, you're going this fast, in the actual speed sign itself. I'm not too sure how much those cost, as opposed to the little trailers that we move around that we can put into communities where speeding is an issue. I don't think Winter Drive is one of them, but have we looked at, as an administration, those type of devices to replace our aging trailers? Because from what you're saying is our trailers are going to need replacement probably in the near future if they can't work during this time of the year and they can't collect data in an efficient manner.
Go ahead, CEO.
Thank you. Yeah, the trailers, yeah, one of them is already, we can't collect data. So the radars still work. So as we want to call it deterrent maybe, or just information, they'll continue to work for a while. We're going to be unable to pull data in the very near future from them. Those pole-mounted signs, they'll call them, the solar arrays with the speed, they start at $10,000. We have priced those out per unit. So obviously you have two directions. Generally, you want them in both directions on the road, so that's $20,000 a street, generally speaking. So again, and that, if council wants that to come back to budget for a more wholesome discussion, most definitely. It's just the efficacy has to be, in my opinion, understood. Like, where are the places and why do we put them here? Because you don't want to get into a situation where complaints drive the budget. You want data or some sort of policy to drive it.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Cummings, you have a supplemental?
Yes, I do, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So if you looked at the price of those, if you looked at the price of refurbishing the trailers, not necessarily replacing them, but refurbishing them, it's just a data collection device. It's may not be as expensive as replacing the whole trailer. Is that an option?
Potentially, we haven't looked at it because the solar panels are also in need of replacement, as well as whatever computer exists inside. I know the trailers, I believe, are around $100,000 a piece now. So refurbishing them, I'm not sure. And I think they're over 20 years old now. So again, I'm sure solar panels can be found fairly easily. I'm not sure what they can be done inside, but it's something I think we're going to explore once we just can't use them anymore.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Councillor Daly.
So, thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. And for CAO Williams, you talk about the design of the Winters Drive, and there's probably a few other examples in our community that were not designed for that amount of flow of traffic. Is there any update that you can give us maybe on an alternative access into the Highlands? Because of course people are, they will take the path of least resistance, and so if we had a more direct way for those residents to get in, it might alleviate some of the pressure on Winters Drive.
Unfortunately, it won't get better until 68A Avenue, which starts in Cornerstone, continues south through Loblaw's property into what we call the Caswell ASP, and comes out at what currently is a gravel stretch of Holy Trinity, which is still owned by that property developer, but is used by the school and maintained by the town. That's going to be the first thing to be built, but there's no timeline on that. It's been stalled for, you would all know better than me, 20 years? 20, I don't know. Yeah, so no, there's absolutely nothing. So
Thank
unfortunately.
you. That's exactly the alternative route. I didn't know all the details, so thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I basically have one with regards, maybe a comment on the Winter Drive, and then just a quick question on the vapor testing. So the Winter Drive, you just made it clear that it's a $10,000 base start, I guess, on those signs, but I have seen some in some communities where they're just very small little signs about, the size of a basketball, and they are just say go slow or slow, and they're just reflective signs. Perhaps maybe something like putting a couple of them down that road, or on some of the other roads that people seem to be complaining about. I think we have a complaint about 52nd Street. There was a lot of people complaining about that during the time when we were doing all the work on there. So, and worried about once it gets all fixed that it was going to be another speedway. So there's other areas in town. I'm not sure what those cost, but I have seen them around. Do you know what I'm talking about, C.O. Williams?
I'm pretty sure I do, but we haven't investigated those costs for go slow signs or whatever it may be.
Possibility just to slow people down. The question, the question I have on vapor testing would be, could you just give us, I know we're going to get a more fulsome report that you mentioned, but could you just give us a little bit of an idea of how things went? Just a quick little overview.
Sure. So I'll start from Protective Services. I think we only received 2 911 calls for vapor entering the home, so that was quite good. The door knocker hanger initiative seemed to work quite well. People were understood it after a week or so of initial concern questions. We found that the amount of cross connections where sanitary and sewer mix were basically nil. We thought we were going to find a smoking gun in that realm. The largest thing was sanitary manholes that were in new developments or developments that hadn't been built yet. So I mentioned the Caswell ASP. We have at least a dozen manholes that are buried at least 10 feet in the ground, which we can't look into right now because it's too far from the most adjacent manhole to camera, that far. So we do have to raise one of those. I don't think it can happen this year just because it's such a large job on private land right now, even though we do have a right-of-way. And the other things are in the vistas, in the future developments. They put in a lot of infrastructure up front. We do have 5 manholes that have sunk and have broken. So we're actually going to start, if you look right now in the vistas, there's very large concrete cylinders about to be installed there, hopefully starting this week. That's phase 1 of fixing those 5. Then we have to spray them, like what we reline them essentially but they're significant as well. The college as well, we're investigating 2 potential significant leaks there. A bit harder because obviously it's private land and a lot of infrastructure is very, very old and maybe underneath some really important things. So, yeah. But fortunately, we didn't see much in our large users of sanitary, like in the Southeast Industrial. We didn't get much there, which, I mean, it's fortunate in a way. It'd be great if it was 3 feet below ground and it solved half our problems. But yeah, overall, it was good. It'll be expensive to fix a lot of this, but it's also very expensive to pay what we're paying right now to the Wastewater Commission. So,
Very much, I appreciate that, and those comments, because certainly it's at the forefront for many people in our community who saw all the signs and understand the vapor testing was going on, so appreciate that. And also, I guess, thank you to the residents who participated and did their part in making sure the testing went off fairly smoothly, so good on them. Sorry, Mayor Dahl?
When you're ready, I'm sorry, I was going to make a motion.
Thank you very much, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that update. It was very eye-opening and ear-opening. Okay, I move that council accept the report, CAO officer's report as presented.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Motion to accept the report is, for information as presented. All in favor? And that motion is carried, and that concludes our business for today's agenda. So thank you very much, everybody, and, sorry? Time is 3:22 for adjournment. Thank you.